under the Trump administration, there was a deep hope that the deep state was on the out. But it appears that there is a renewed focus on the attempt of the CIA itself to recruit, as the New York Times reports, Chinese nationals with new videos. It reflects a priority from the CIA Director John Ratcliffe, who has placed an increasing emphasis on the agency's intelligence collection on China. So a pair of new CIA videos released on May 1st aim to encourage Chinese nationals to spy for the agency, appealing to their frustrations and fears with the government and its corruption. They're modeled on a series of videos the agency made in recent year asking Russians to spy for the United States, appeals CIA leaders said helped develop new sources. Now, I want to actually pull up and play a segment of this just so people can get a feel. You know, this video is all about a frustrated a Chinese official who is looking for a path out of quote unquote hardship and toil. Here is the video. It's in Mandarin and there are subtitles. So I'll play it on silent, just read those subtitles. I had to forge my own path. And there you can see him to do or not to do. The answer is obvious. We can no longer stand still. I refused to lie down and took the first step, always the hardest. It's time to build my own dream. There you see the CIA. It's the dream. And there you see he said yes to the CIA. And here comes the message to join the CIA now. There you go, the emblem and all. China has experience with the CIA attempting to infiltrate its country. It has a massive anti-corruption campaign now. Is this going to succeed?
There's a lot of misunderstanding, particularly these Western China-focused, quote-unquote, China hand has about China. Even people who have studied in China, who have lived in China, but work for these think tanks and CIA front organizations, they think that this ultimately this goes to that same mentality that was exposed in the Vietnam War era movie Full Metal Jacket. Remember when the sergeant says, "Inside every there's an American dying to get out." I mean, that's still the same mentality that permeates these thinkings around China or East Asia. People still think, oh, they're just like everyone is a potential American consumers that's ready to join us. That's not the case. China has been, I think, the most pro-Western generation in China are the people who grow up in the 60s, 70s, and maybe even early 80s, because those people who witnessed firsthand, especially during the early 80s, during the open and reform period, when they saw emerging out of the Cultural Revolution, they saw the huge gap in the material living standard between China and the developed West. And, many of them turn them into like diehard pro-Western liberals. But for the generation that grew up after Cultural Revolution, I'm the first post-Cultural Revolution generation. I was born 1 month after Mao passed away. So from my personal experience, that life was getting better and better every year in China. But for the people who are born in the 90s, I was born in 1976, but for the Chinese people who were born in the 90s and 2000s, their experience was drastically different. They have been born into a much more stronger and more self-confident China. And their experience was that United States was this persistent hostile power that's trying to kneecap China's progress. So, if anything, the people who are born in the 90s and 2000s, they're way more nationalistic than I am. Okay, and if the CIA video is to work, and if they manage to find some recruits somehow, the video somehow resonate with them, I must say they're probably racking up the dumbest people in China that's willing to work with CIA after watching that video. Also we know that China has been onto their tactics for a while. We have the articles from New York Times that says in 2012 China basically killed all the CIA networks in China. This is another informational asymmetry. Chinese people on average actually understood more about the West than vice versa. There's a lot more Chinese people can read and speak English and travel abroad than Americans who have been to China, have a passable Chinese language skills, can read and write. So this is why they're, like in the art of war, Sun Tzu said, know yourself and know your enemy. That will make sure you emerge victorious out of 100 battles. But the problem with the U.S. is that it barely knows itself. It barely knows its own strengths and weaknesses. And so, I'm not worried. I don't think Chinese government is worried about this kind of amateurish videos.
Well, here is the report that you're talking about, Carl. Killing CIA informants, China crippled U.S. spying operations. This was published during the first Trump administration. And it talked about systematically the Chinese government in 2010 dismantled CIA spying operations in the country, imprisoning or killing more than a dozen sources over 2 years, and crippling intelligence gathering there for years afterward. And actually, Brian, I remember under the Biden administration, it was William Burns, I believe, the CIA director, who called for a new mission center for both China and Iran, precisely because U.S. intelligence has had such a huge difficulty rebuilding their spy networks, but those mission centers are not going to be located in China. So your thoughts on this dynamic, because it gets right into that coercion and that asymmetry that you were talking about, Brian, or that you've been working on so much.
I think Carl brought up a really important point. The type of people that you're going to attract, especially now with these type of campaigns, they are usually, I wouldn't say unintelligent. I don't think that's quite fair, but they're ignorant. They're extremely profoundly ignorant. They also have severe character flaws. And I'm talking about the most selfish, self-centered, short-sighted people imaginable that you will ever meet. Because I know, because I've met the US-backed opposition here in Thailand. I've studied them for years. I've been in their offices before I was before I did public videos and wrote under my own name. I wrote under a pen name, and I was in their offices while I was writing articles about them. They didn't even know I was there. And like I said, these are very selfish, greedy, ignorant people. And so the quality of an opposition made up, you build an army up of these type of people, but what is it ultimately capable of doing? And we see all around the globe what it's capable of doing is destroying and knocking things down, but it's not so good at building things up. And if a nation, especially a nation like China, is more than capable of defending itself against the chaos, they really don't have to worry about anything being built that displaces the system that's already in place. I would say a country like Thailand, the biggest threat Thailand faces is these kind of people creating space where the US is then building alternate institutions in it. So I think the threat really isn't inside of China. It's along China's periphery. I've always advocated for an ASEAN-wide, or even just each individual nation here in Southeast Asia, working together with nations like Russia and China that have successfully secured their information space, their education system, and their political system to work together to wall off these countries from this type of interference. It is against international law, as according to the UN Charter. Every single nation has a right to do it. The reason that they don't is usually because the US says, if you uproot our NED-funded opposition, we will crush you with sanctions. Your kids are studying overseas in the US. We'll take away their visas. Maybe we'll detain them. You will never travel to the West. All of your assets in the West will be taken. And unfortunately, a lot of people in these other countries, they still have this deep desire to be accepted by the West. And so this is a deterrent to actually standing up for their own nation's best interest because they're still so obsessed with this idea of a West that no longer exists. I was watching the CIA, as Carl was talking, I was watching it on mute on his X feed, and this guy is standing at a window, and it's like a city 40 years in the future. If you live in America, and it's like 40 years in the future, there's literally flying cars, and he's like, "Oh, this is so terrible." You're like, you know what would really seal America's fate is if they forced any of these Chinese CIA agents to do something in the U.S., like do a retreat or something in the U.S., and to be like, "What have I done?
Yeah.
Why did I sign up for this?"
Yeah, send them to any U.S. city compared to.
I would be a spy for China, but I'm scared that they'll send me to the U.S. to do my work.
I mean, that's the trend. It does reek of desperation, though. And China was much weaker in 2010, Carl. Much weaker. It did not have the same economic capacity. It didn't have the same level of unity. I mean, Chinese people are much more unified even now than they were then around this question. And Donald Trump has played a huge role in that in many respects. Talk about the difference then, because if China was, kicking the CIA's behind in 2010, what makes them think that something is going to change now?
I don't think it's more like, they have the budget, they have the money, so they got to spend it, right? This is how U.S. government works. They got to spend the budget, otherwise the money is gone. So it goes into fund projects like this. And I'm sure they will continue to infiltrate. I mean, like Brian says, a lot of time, those kind of video only works on very ignorant people. Particularly the people who are ignorant of the true condition inside United States. A lot of time I raise about China, U.S. people are saying, "Oh, but why are these still Chinese people trying to sneak across the border, from Mexico, etc." Well, let me tell you, on Chinese social media, there were actually a lot of videos that were, talking about United States as some kind of utopia. You would not believe the kind of stuff they say on the Chinese social media. There's like, this is a real propaganda, on Chinese social media. They say, the U.S. has excellent social welfare network. You basically, if your children can go to school without paying tuition. You have full healthcare benefit, and if you go to U.S., one person can work and comfortably support a family of 3 and 4 people, and with a big house. I mean, this is fantasy for anybody who actually live in the United States. No, this is completely fantasy. But for Chinese people who have never had overseas exposures, they may believe that. They may really thought the United States is a place where the streets are paved with gold, right? Compared to China. And I saw so many interviews of people who, those Chinese people who have snuck across the Mexican border to come to United States in the recent years, and they said, we got fooled. We got fooled by those social media videos we saw on WeChat, on Douyin, and United States is completely different from what I expected. But now I'm stuck here, because and again, so I think for most of this is why I actually encourage, Chinese people, including many of them who may be dissatisfied with China or Chinese government, to go out, go to U.S., to even if you have to climb over the walls in the Mexican border to see what U.S. is really like. Then you have a compare and contrast. But for me, it's just kind of laughable to see these CIA video kind of they prey on ignorance, and they're not exactly getting the best quality human capitals that's going to work for them. And this is probably why their network got rooted out in the 2012 in the first place, and they're obviously not going to succeed.
What I said earlier about the Trump administration, many people believed that the deep state was going to be dead, that it was going to be broken up, that this was going to end. But then you had John Ratcliffe in announcing this effort, or in this announcement of this effort to recruit Chinese nationals to essentially become turncoats for the U.S. empire. He was quoted to Congress saying that China is the biggest challenge to the national security of the United States, and this is why the CIA has to be stronger, and it has to refocus on China. So comments on this, because I think many people are missing this, as especially the Ukraine conflict. You have waltz, you have the shuffle in the Trump administration, all of this going on, but not a lot of attention to how the United States is really trying. Whether it succeeds or not, I think the jury is out on whether it will succeed at all, but it is trying, and it will have an effect. It is trying to reorient toward China, including the deep state.
What is the deep state? The deep state are these deeply entrenched corporate financier monopolies on Wall Street. And for decades and decades, they have controlled Washington. And their biggest obsession is not just global domination in general, obviously, but specifically stopping the rise of China. This has been their obsession for generations. The U.S. was part of the century of humiliation, if people remember back to that time. And since then, the U.S. has maintained a military presence all across Asia Pacific, attempted to work its way in, tried to reimpose European colonization in places like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. They never succeeded in colonizing Thailand, but that was something that they have constantly tried to do, and to this day are still doing. So that is the goal of the deep state. And if the Trump administration comes along and they say that is our goal, that it's obvious he wasn't ever intending on uprooting the deep state. And this is so obvious because he was already president for 4 years. And for all 4 years, he didn't drain the swamp of the deep state. He dredged it out so he could fit bigger swamp monsters in the swamp. So I don't understand how anyone is falling for this again. Do people remember when he was picking his cabinet this time? And I was warning people that they're all going to be neocons, warmongers, and deep state facilitators. And then when the name Marco Rubio was floating around, people were like, "That's not true. That's fake news. This is to just make the Trump administration fall apart before it even comes together." And then it literally was Marco Rubio, and then a whole string, just like you just named, Danny, all of these neocons and deep state facilitators. Scott Besson, we've been talking about him this entire conversation. He was literally a partner at George Soros's fund. So he is the deep state that we're fighting against, and we pull like one of the most senior members of that organization into the administration. And then they just had Michael Anton. They signed him up for talks with Iran.
The postponed talks, meanwhile, who knows if those are ever going to come back after Hegseth's drunken message. And the sanctions are literally what Iran is negotiating over. So now that that Trump is saying there's going to be secondary sanctions on, that means there's no sanctions talk. There's going to be no sanctions relief, because secondary sanctions literally mean that the sanctions are getting more severe. So those have been postponed. Anyway, continue, Brian. But I just wanted to...
Yes. Well, why is Iran not impressed by these negotiations? Because you have someone like Michael Anton, who helped the Bush Jr. administration lie about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which has led to the permanent occupation of Iraq right on Iran's border. And where was his before he got involved in politics? He was in BlackRock. And who did Trump help arrange to buy these ports near the Panama Canal? BlackRock. So he's not fighting against the deep state. He is working for the deep state, so obviously. And again, it comes down to the primary obsession of the deep state, which is preventing any other nation, especially a non-white nation, from surpassing the collective West. That is China. And so it's not a coincidence that the Trump administration's obsession is the same as the Biden administration, which is the same as the deep state, because it's, again, Washington works for the deep state, and that this does not make the Trump administration an exception. It's just a continuation of the rule.
And I want to say one thing before I get your comment, Carl. is this. Many people have been coming in comments, replies, messages to me saying, man, you just don't like Donald Trump. And I just want to say this. First of all, my work has been consistently anti-empire, anti-imperialist for years and years and years, which inherently means partisanship is poison. The two parties are both for empire. They have been since before I was born, since before many of you watching have been born. So let's just get that out of the way. But Donald Trump campaigned, just like he did in his first term, campaigned on being anti-deep state, campaigned on being anti-war. Biden and the Democrats, they don't do that. They actually, they give war a hug. They come at you with, we want war. Donald Trump says, I don't want war. So it is necessary then when Donald Trump says, I don't want war, and then he ends up actually escalating war, creating more war, starting more war, that we talk about it, we speak out about it, and we expose that. I just want to get that out there because it's ridiculous to me that anyone with a thinking mind that isn't just wanting to support Donald Trump because they like Donald Trump and he's their guy and their team could fathom just completely leaving out this reality that's right in front of our faces now. But Carl, I want to bring you back in here.
You could raise a good point, Danny, because many American presidents in the past have campaigned on the anti-war platform. People might not remember this now, but George W. Bush, back then, during his first campaign, he was campaigning, a much very similar to what the America First of Trump. He was campaigning on focusing on United States, less foreign intervention. Well, guess what happened on his turn? And then you have Obama. Obama also campaigned to be the anti-war candidate. He was the anti-war candidate, right? That's how he positioned why you should choose me over Hillary in the primary. Well, guess what he did when he became the president? He made Hillary Clinton the Secretary of the State, and he carried out. He just made the war more covert and more proxy war. He did the whole Libya thing, the Syria thing. And he also initiated the U.S. intervention in the Yemen civil war, which went back to 2014, and so that was when U.S. first started to directly involving a proxy war in Yemen. More than 10 years ago under Obama, and Trump, and also Trump also campaigned on anti-imperialism, anti-war, because he knew that would get him votes. He write on the popular discontent with the Biden administration's interventionist policy, and of course, once he's in power, he does exactly the same. He's escalate just in the different places, right? And I'm surprised why anybody would expect this will be any different. And I have always said, U.S. government is of the oligarchs, by the oligarchs, for the oligarchs. When you're when you go to election, you're just electing a different set of the oligarchs, right? Right now, with the Trump administration, we have the finance bro and the tech bro from Silicon Valley are fully entrenched in power. All these venture capitalists from, I wouldn't even call them tech bros, because a lot of them are they're just venture capitalists. They're just the ones who provide the funds for the tech startup. So it's a just different set of the elite that's running the show now, and they're still part of the 1%. They're just a different group, a revolving door of a different group of people, and like Brian pointed out, Scott Bison. A lot of these Trump supporters like, oh yeah, we're gonna get the globalist elite, the Soros-funded globalist elite out of power. Look at Scott Bison, the Treasury Secretary. He literally works for the he was the lieutenant of George Soros, the Soros Fund. And I think one of the obsession Bison actually have with China is back in 1990. So Bison is the one who many people might know this or may not. the George Soros, they were behind attack on the pound sterling that broke the Bank of England, right? So that was Scott Basin was known for. But so they tried to do the same in 1997 during the Asian financial crisis by attacking Hong Kong dollar. You know, they also attacked other Asian currencies, but they went after the Hong Kong dollar in a big way. And this was just after the Chinese handover. So the Chinese government came in and said, you know what? We are the new landlord of Hong Kong, and we're not going to allow you to do that. So they defended the Hong Kong dollar, and George Soros lost shit tons of money over that trade. And I don't think they ever forgave China for that. And so this is like, this is a personal grudge people like Scott Bison have toward China. Now they get an opportunity to play the country as he would play a hedge fund, right? Which, you know, just betting all over. Instead of playing with the money of the retirees, the teacher and doctors, now he's playing with the fortune of all 336 million Americans.